Hello, YouTube and social media. It's been a long time. I apologize. I've been busy. What can I say? I'm sure everybody has. But we had some questions that popped up in class about the velocity based training from theory to application by Jonathan Weekly, myself, Harry Banyard, Sean McLaren, Tana Scott, and Amador Garcia Ramos. So I thought I'd go ahead and record this video to answer their questions and share with you guys in case there's anything that in this paper that really sparks your interest. Because God knows it's VBT, so you know I'm interested. So here's just a quick figure about, there's different ways to use VBT. You can go from super in depth to, just kind of sitting on the outskirts. And none of them is wrong, and none of them is better than the other. It's just something that fits your use. So if we look here on the less use of velocity, well, if we get feedback for acute performance enhancement, well, that goes to back with the paper by Randall et al. That I believe I recorded for this YouTube channel. That just simply getting feedback of the data will not we, but your athletes will oftentimes have better results. They get the feedback, they see that, oh, that rep was too slow, so now all of a sudden they go faster. Then we can look at prescribing general starting velocities for training. Well, we just know that, hey, this goes along with like the VBD zones and things like that, and really the next two do. So that there's just these general prescribing velocities that it's like, okay, you want to do strength speed, you want to do speed strength. Hey, here's a couple of different recommendations that we can give you really, really quickly, and then we'll go from there. Now, it's not super in depth, it's not super detailed, but it's a good starting point that you can just throw them out on the floor and do a little bit more than just giving them the feedback. We can look at monitoring fatigue across training sessions with velocity, and one of the ways to do that would be there's a few different means. Let's talk about a couple of them. For one, of course, you can look at their predicted 1RM. So if we look at their predicted 1RM, we will be able to track and see what is the trend of this individual. Is their 1RM maintaining? If it's an in season, that's a great thing to do. Is the 1RM moving up? Especially if you're using sub-maximal loads and you don't really know how much strength has improved, that gives you a concept to be able to do and to understand. And then another means is by looking at the warm-up sets. And then you can say, hey, I noticed that I'm 0.1 meters per second slower or faster on my warm-up set. Well, we know that about every 0.06 meters per second is about 5% of 1RM on average. Yeah, everybody's slope is a little different, but on average, that's about where you're at. So then you can you can alter the loads for the training session based off of the warm-up. Assess adaptations with velocity. Really, whenever we're getting into that, that could be like force velocity profiling. So we see where were the changes more made. Were they made in the load end of the spectrum, the velocity end of the spectrum? Where was that done at? The prescribing arbitrary velocity cutoffs to mitigate fatigue. Well, this is the first step. This is one of the areas that I started before I really knew about velocity loss. I just noticed that, hey, if I cut them off at a drop off of 0.05 meters per second, then we're not doing any more repetitions below that velocity. Calculating daily 1RM for training prescription. Well, if you start the training prescription, and this is very, very similar to the looking at your warm-up sets and changing prescription. But hey, if you're starting out, and sometimes people like to do the Bulgarian methods, right? And what I mean, the Bulgarian methods. Well, if you look at Ivan Abajiev's program, one of the things that he used to do would be to train and hit a daily 1RM and then back off and do his percentages and sets and reps to get his volume through there. Well, we don't actually have to go up to a 1RM. You could look at what it's predicted to be and then prescribe everything else based on that. Prescribing relative velocity loss thresholds for training. We're getting up into the greater use, right? So we know that from the works of various people with velocity loss, and one of my favorite papers comes from the Scandinavian Journal of Sports Science or something like that, and Fernando Pereira Blanco is the lead author there. And basically, what we know is that velocity loss is fatigue, right? And the less fatigue that you induce, the more you sit more onto the, shall we say, neural side of the adaptations, and you're not fatiguing all the type 1 fibers. So we're sort of mitigating fatigue. Now, whenever we have that fatigue mitigated, it is a balance. And I believe I did a video off on Fernando's paper, so hopefully you can go check that out. But with the 40% velocity loss, that's getting near failure. The hypertrophy gains were much greater. All of the fibers hypertrophied. At a 20% velocity loss, the type 1 fibers hypertrophied a little bit, but their cross-sectional area did not increase to that same extent. Also, if we wanted to look at the performance measures, well, the strength, the power, and the speed adaptations were better for the 20% loss than the 40% loss. So it's like, what are we wanting to do during training? It depends. Well, you could pick your velocity losses based on that. Prescribing training from individual load velocity profiles. And whenever you get down to it, this was kind of where I was headed with the zones. What I really liked about velocity was the relationship between the percentage of 1RM and its corresponding velocity for that day. So it was a way to manage fatigue prior to the training session. Whenever you have individualized load velocity profiles, you know exactly what that person's 60% is. All right, so if their 60% was 0.82 meters per second, instead of giving them 60%, you give them 0.82 meters per second. And then that plus or minus a buffer, not a filter, plus or minus a buffer that allows you to train exactly where you needed to be. And implementing full velocity-based programming, that's where you're doing on most of the exercises, on all your big rock exercises, where you're getting to there. And I'm going to tell you a secret. Not even I do everything based off of velocity. I actually think that's stupid. Now, here is a chart that I wanted to show you that is just giving you some ideas that, hey, if you are wanting to do 1RM predictions, where should you set your terminal velocity? Well, we could see on the left column is the exercise. And I don't agree with doing all of these exercises for velocity, and that's okay. Other people can want to do that. I don't see the point. We could see who the authors of the study were, and then you could go to our paper, and then you could look at the references to pull that study. You could see who the subjects were. What was the sample, and we could see what was their 1RM, and then whenever you average that out, what happens? What is the velocity of 1RM? What's the one that you should use? Well, what we can look at is that, for instance, we can see that, hey, let's just look at the top one on bench press because it's got the widest variety of individuals. We can see that we had 120 young males, 75 athletes, healthy males, and 15 power lifters. And if you notice, the people that use resistance training as GPP, right, just as a general physical preparedness to enhance the results of something else, we can see that their velocities are much faster than the power lifter, who's at 0.10. Now, this is an example of what's often referred to as neuromuscular efficiency. And what this means is that the power lifters are able to move slower and slower without failing, so then they can lift a heavier and heavier load. So that's a positive adaptation for their sport. Most of the time we think of positive adaptations as increases, but in this instance, a positive adaptation is actually a decrease. So that's just something that I wanted to go ahead and throw out there and point out. And I'm bringing that up because sometimes you need to make sure that you adapt the velocities to your population. So if you've got a wide variety of different people in there. You've got some power lifters, some healthy athletes, some tactical people, military, firefighter, police, some students, some elderly people. The velocities are often going to vary. Now, this is an example of a load velocity profile, and most people have probably already seen this, and this is in individuals. So this one individual at 20%, they hit 1.41, 40% 1.16, 60% 0.86, 80% 0.55, 90% on 0.40. And this is on a, not again, but this is on a back squat exercise. And we could see how closely this individual fit to that regression line. It wasn't perfect, but we could see that the predictive value is pretty darn good at 0.9983. And this is a individual load velocity profile. So now I could just go in and throw in whatever percentage. So let's say that I wanted him to move at 75%. Well, I just go 75% times negative 0.0146 plus 1.722. And that's going to give me the velocity that he should be moving at. So whenever you do this and you set up that regression, you can throw everything in there and be as specific and dialed in as possible. Something that's pretty cool. Here, this reminds me a little bit of the INOL stuff. Now, what do I mean by the INOL? If you're not familiar with it, that's okay. But essentially, you're looking at, how much fatigue do you want to induce that day? Do we want to go to a maximum, or do we want to back off some? Now, again, this is done with the back squat, and we know that this individual's 1RM, for this group was about 0.26 meters per second. So then if we are wanting to do a single and we want it to be very light, well, we could look at 0.71, or if we wanted it to be heavy, we'd be at 0.35, okay? And that would be at about, somewhere around 92%, I would say. And then moderately heavy, moderate, and we could see how it backs off there. If you did a 10 RM, you'd want your first repetition to be about 0.63 meters per second, and it'll probably back off there if you're wanting a 10 RM. But what if you're just wanting a heavy 10 RM? Well, then we're going to be stopping a rep from failure and do 0.69. Well, what if you wanted to go 2 reps from failure? Okay, that would be moderately heavy. We're going to go first repetition of 0.75. And it might not be first repetition, it might be the second, but the fastest repetition should be in one of those two, and that would be the appropriate velocity there. Now this is an example of how to monitor and pay attention to your training adaptations. So what we see is the red dots indicate the estimated 1RM. And we could look at the velocity on the side because that's all that it is. Now we can see that for the first 10 weeks of a maintenance phase, our estimated 1RM stayed pretty close to that line. It stayed pretty consistent. Why would we want to do that? Well, gosh, you burn yourself out if you're going pedal to the metal all of the time. So what you have to end up doing is having some variation in training, some hard periods and some easier periods. Otherwise, you're going to end up with joint replacements at 35 like I did. Well, we see that during the maintenance phase, we are maintaining their 100 kilo velocity around 0.9 meters per second. And then we hit the training phase. And we could see that, hey, our predicted 1RM has started to climb up and it's above the previous level for our 100 kilo load. Ideally, we'll be following this and watching that load and watching it change over time. And hopefully we're just watching it go up and up and up until this dude's squatting like, 2 grand and setting world records that will never be broken. Now, this is just looking at the concentric velocity changes, how they happened and continued on. We are outside of this 90% confidence interval. So yeah, we are probably seeing this pretty good change here. That we're seeing some increases. Now here's something that's pretty cool. What this is based on another paper that Jono had led and I was involved in. That they were looking at in A. This is the declination of velocity across 3 sets whenever they were regulated by velocity loss. And so we could see that, hey, this velocity did not drop off. It stayed pretty close to the same. Yeah, there's a little bit of a declination, but I don't think that these are going to be significant. And there was actually one person who increased, so they saw a potentiation effect. So that's pretty cool. On B, we see whenever they did 3 sets of 5 or, I can't remember. 10 repetitions. So they did 3 sets of 10. What happened? Well, they saw a pretty steady decrease across all sets. Now, the chart below is just showing that, hey, here is that mean velocity that occurred. So we took out all the lines. The top is called a spaghetti plot. And one of the reasons why I always like spaghetti plots is so that we could get just a visualization of the data. It's like, okay, well, I see that A, it was super tight, and B, it's all over the place. Well, then I look at C, and I look at that visual representation. That I see 0.63, 0.63, 0.63 for VBT, so the mean velocity did not change. And I see that in the percentage-based group, a 0.61, a 0.57, and a 0.53, all with large standard error bars. So we could see that how wide those adaptations are. What is that spread? It's pretty big. This is just talking about, hey, some different methods, and these are all in my book, right? Or if you really want to go into more depth there. But basically, sometimes you'll have prescribed something, sometimes you'll have fixed, and sometimes you'll have flexible. So like set average velocity, I'll have a prescribed number of sets, I'll have a prescribed number of repetitions, but I alter the load every set to maintain my set and repetition. Make sure I'm at the right load to get what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I have to move up, sometimes I have to move down. If I have a set average velocity plus velocity thresholds, it changes a little bit, where I've got a prescribed number of sets, but I don't do, so I might have just 10 sets, but I don't know how many reps I'm doing. I'm just trying to keep it in like a 20% velocity loss, right? So anytime that it drops below 20% velocity loss off of that first repetition, I'm done. The load, it's like, hey, if I start dropping off too much for my first set, I need to drop the load too, and that's okay. And we can go on and on through this, but I just thought that this might be something good for you if you hadn't seen it, that you would get some good ideas here. Target velocity plus velocity thresholds. This is another thing this is one that I really have utilized a lot and saw some great adaptations for, especially with my throwers. I would give them, hey, if I want you to be at point, like on a clean, let's be at 1.55 meters per second, and if you drop off below 1.5 meters per second, so we're at like a 5% velocity loss, then we're done. So that's just some things, and like I said, I could talk about this chart for actually probably about 2 weeks and make more, but I love this stuff. That's all there is to it. Now we're seeing chronic adaptations versus acute responses. What are you trying to do? Is it acute or is it chronic? And we could see that, do you want to use less velocity loss or greater velocity loss? So for changes in muscle volume, well, if I want to have more, if I have more velocity loss, I'm going to have a greater response in my muscle volume. If I use less velocity loss, I'm going to be seeing smaller adaptations in hypertrophy. Now, that's okay, and it could be sorry, I had a little Diet Mountain Dew spillage there. Hold on just one second. That's awesome. What you want is, there's not one thing that's better than the other, and I want to go ahead and point that out. It's what your individual athlete needs. If they have a need for 2x fibers, well, if you use a lower velocity loss, you're actually going to see an increase and your, I don't even want to say 2x. I would actually go more along the lines of 2a, because when 2x increases, that's usually just in specific people rather than for a specific adaptation. But what if I want to increase my type 1 muscle fibers? Well, if I go with a greater velocity loss, I'm going to get there. Same with muscular endurance. Greater velocity loss, I am going to be seeing better endurance. Well, with power, if I do a greater velocity loss, I'm actually going to be seeing less power development. I might actually become slower. So sometimes less is better. And this leads me to the point that I have been, banging on this drum for the last few years. More is not better, less is not better, better is better. So just try and find the appropriate training. Pinpoint what is it that you're trying to develop, and then develop your training based on that. Base all of your training around what you're trying to develop. Some conclusions. VBTs is exercise velocity to inform or enhance training practice. It can be implemented as a tool that works alongside a traditional percentage-based method, so like feedback, or it can use to auto-regulate the training volume and intensity for each athlete. Hey, if you like this information, come join us at the U. I've got an 8-week general course. We've got special topics courses for you practitioners. You don't have to be seeking a degree to come learn from me here at the U. We've got, so if you need to get a master's degree, let's say that you're thinking, hey, I want to go into exercise physiology, or I want to go into physical therapy, or I want to go back to med school, but I need to take a gap year. We got a 1-year program that is an accelerated master's in applied exercise physiology. Of course, you could take it out to 2 years, try and get some papers and things like that with this. That I've got more data than I know what to do with. So if people are wanting to help out with that, come on down, baby. I know the U is extremely expensive, though, so that's that might put a kibosh on some people there. But it doesn't stop you from your education. With the special topics courses, which are basically a choose your own adventure course, and then the 8-week general. And then, of course, we've got the undergraduate in exercise physiology, which some people might be listening to here because they're in the class. But, hey, if you're wanting to go into strength and conditioning, if you're wanting to go to physical therapy, medicine, anything, obviously, within exercise phys, we got a great program for that. We've got some great faculty, some great facilities, and we've got some great research going on here. So, hey, thank you for your time and showing this. Apologize about the Diet Dew incident there in the middle. If I was better at editing, I would just put that out. But, hey, you know what? That's okay. It's letting you know I'm human, too. And because it's Diet Dew and caffeine, you guys know I wasn't faking this sucker. All right. Hope you're doing well. And